Today, I am excited to be collaborating with Annie Neubrech. Welcome, Annie.
Hello, nice to be here.
Yes, so I worked with Annie during my tenure at SAP in a variety of different capacities. My favorite really being when we both took on leadership opportunities when we were at SAP in Latin America. It was really an opportunity where we got to come together and build something and really work in a completely different way. So, Annie, as we get started, I would love if you could share a bit of an introduction about your experience and what led you into sales.
Yeah, thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here and to talk to all of you. I spent most of my career working in sales organizations and marketing in teams, but I was never a sales rep. And so I worked with channel partners. I did a lot of operational things. I ended up being a COO because of my background for that all in North America. So I didn't have any international experience. And so when I got the kind of invite to apply for and be considered for Latin America sales leadership role, I was sort of like, well, why me? I don't have this sales, I hadn't carried the bag, as people like to say at SAP, and I didn't speak Spanish or Portuguese. So it, the very interesting thing was that's not what they were looking for. They wanted somebody to come in and influence change and really help take the culture from what it was to transform it and also bring in new ideas from outside the region. So I kind of checked all of those boxes and ended up in Latin America in a sales leadership role during the pandemic. So it has so many moving parts to it, but to your point, it was a lot of fun.
So, Annie, that's a very unique experience to come into sales leadership not carrying a bag into a different culture during a pandemic. Can you talk about how some of the unique things from your background that were not the traditional sales leadership background and how that helped you in taking on the leadership in this transition?
Yeah, I think that for me, what I really learned is that I don't know everything and I never have pretended to know everything. And when you're building a team, everybody's got their experiences that they bring. So I always try to really respect those experiences and say, what is it that they need from me? Not what can I bring to them, but what do they need from me? And so I was able to take that into Latin America. I knew that I wasn't lying to anybody about pretending to be something that I wasn't because I had never said I carried a bag. But I had very, very experienced salespeople on the team. I had very experienced sales managers, they're direct managers. So
Mhm.
I didn't need to bring that experience to them. I needed to bring a different type of leadership that they needed. And I needed to bring my network from North America to really help them. So I just remembered what it was. I reminded myself often, why did you get hired by the president? What did she
Mhm.
want you to do? So that I didn't have to worry about trying to do something different than what she wanted me to do. And I shared that with everybody. I never said, I'm here to pretend to be something I'm not. So just honesty, right?
I love the honesty, but the authenticity to that too, of in stepping in a new role and in uncomfortable, uncharted waters, reminding yourself and really grounding yourself in why was I hired? Why did they have the confidence for me to take this on? And then leaning into that as a strength. I think that's really beautiful. So while I worked with you, one of the things that I loved about your style was the authenticity that you mentioned, as well as the empathy that you really talked about with how you brought that into your leadership. I'd love to hear a little bit about your leadership style and, foundationally, your overall approach to leadership.
Yeah. Well, my style has always been to listen first and then to really get to know the individuals. I believe in situational leadership. And for those of you that are listening and saying, that sounds like a pretty cool, catchy buzzword, it's actually a real thing out there. So go research it because if you learn situational leadership, you're really learning to understand the individual and what they need in that situation. And so for me, I took situational leadership and said, well, how will I know if I don't know them? So I got to know, and that's something, it's been a best practice for me. I get to know as many people on my team that are direct reports as possible. And I've been fortunate in my tenure that the teams haven't been so large that I haven't been able to really do that. So even if there's 100 people, I maybe don't talk to every one of them, but as many as I can. And I especially want to get to know leaders and laggards, if you will, right? The ones that are either causing trouble or the ones that are really the change agents out there.
Mhm,
And so getting to know them means you spend 30 minutes on a phone call with them. You talk to them about who they are, what's going on in their lives, I tell them about me, who I am. I'm a grandma. At the time when I was at LAC, you remember this, Katie, I was having my first grandchild, not me personally, but my daughter-in-law and son, and, it was such an exciting time that I couldn't help but share the news with
mhm,
everybody and tell people how excited I was. So, I find that you build trust when you build that relationship, and it's got to be authentic, as you said,
mhm,
and then build on that. So I took really good notes, and I remember a few people were having babies or somebody's, mother was in the hospital, and I followed up with them and in a genuine way because I did care, like, how did this outcome happen or what's going
mhm.
on? And people appreciated those little gestures, and that over time, they realized they could reach out to me. I also think it's very important in those initial conversations to talk about your career, what it is that you want because you're in a short journey as somebody's tenure, right? I mean, and I ask you, Katie, what's the longest manager you've ever had that you've
3
reported
years.
directly to?
2 to 3 years.
Exactly, right? So we're all here only touching somebody's career for, if you're lucky, 3 years. That's a long time. Often it's maybe 1 to 2 years. So
Mhm,
what is their situation? How can I help them be the best contributor that they can be? That helps the team, but also help them in their career journey.
mhm.
Because they'll remember that, and that feels really good as a leader. You should always want somebody to be doing really well and going on to the next thing in their career if you are a genuine leader.
I love that, of that human connection, because when you think about this, we were crossing not only cultures with coming from North America into Latin America, where there's a very different language and communication style, but also in a pandemic where it was virtual. I know for
Yep.
myself, I didn't get on a plane for over a year to meet anyone in person. And so it becomes that much harder to build those connections.
Yes.
And I can see, and I saw when we worked together, the value of the time that you put in to get to know the team as people and individuals first, and how that gave you the ability to move quicker when we needed to bring about change because those relationships were built and it didn't feel so scary as we might do
Yeah.
things differently.
Yeah, we sure did get to meet a lot of people's dogs, didn't we, during the pandemic?
Absolutely. Mine may still interrupt us today.
Yeah, exactly. Dogs
Yeah.
and kids I
Yeah.
think in some ways, though, because we weren't allowed to travel, we didn't spend time, like, alone on airplanes for 8 hours. It did really allow me personally to get to know individuals fast because I would schedule sometimes 6 one-on-ones a day just to
Hmm.
try to ramp up and get to know the team as quickly as I could. I couldn't do that, if I was flying to Brazil and then to Argentina. So, in some ways, I think it helped really kind of form those relationships quickly and in a very fast way.
Well, and, when we think about how we were connecting, there was so much for me to learn as I stepped into this leadership there, where I think it was helpful to just have step back of, I'm the foreigner here. I want to learn from you. And I know for myself, I approached a lot of these conversations of wanting to understand how best do you want to communicate? I always was asking the question, how can I help you be successful in your job? And wanting to kind of navigate that way to really start to build those relationships.
Yes, and oftentimes, if you just start with a conversation and not an agenda, you will hear a lot, and again, you're really good at this, but you will end that conversation, reflect on it, and say, "You know what I heard or I didn't hear? That this is where I can add value to them," and come back with some ideas or, "Have you thought of this?" And,
Mhm.
again, if you don't have the agenda, you'll be surprised sometimes what it is that just kind of unveils itself and it becomes an opportunity. And especially, I think it was fortunate you and I came from such large regions that we just took for granted. We didn't even know things that were special in North America that Latin America wasn't enjoying the luxury
Mhm.
of it, the knowledge, the skill sets, that we could then say, oh, well, here's some example, or here's, start collaborating and building the network, helping them find mentors outside of their region. All
Mhm.
of those little things, it's like a checkbox, checkbox, checkbox that add up to, wow, they're really contributing to me. And they haven't done anything that's sales necessarily related, right? Like, not
Yeah.
like I'm helping them with that little part of their job. I'm helping them with all of the other things that build them up.
Well, and the principle that you talked about with getting to know not just your direct reports, but really the full team, that skip level, I found that that was a very standard practice for us in North America, but in crossing boundaries and into a different culture, that was very foreign. And, I found when that happened, people were almost afraid for their job. So,
Yes.
I know trust is one of those important pillars for you. Can you talk about, how building that trust then helps you run faster and be more effective as things unfolded?
Yes. And to your point there, Katie, I want to touch on this, the cultural aspect of, and I think maybe we don't even do this sometimes enough in North America, because if you talk to people in the Northeast versus the South versus,
Mhm.
that there's just different expectations, or different, it's like that's offensive to me in the South, but it's not offensive to me if you approach things that way. So you have to be very aware of the culturals, the like microcultures, right? And
Yes.
um and that was very important for me to pay attention to, because Mexico is very different than Brazil, as you and I learned.
Oh,
And
yes.
so add that on to, how do I now go build trust? And then how does having that established trust is the trust of, I believe in you. I believe what you tell me is true. I that doesn't mean I know everything, but and I also believe that if I need help and I come to you, you will do everything in your power to help me. And that if I've done something wrong, that I trust you not to retaliate against me or to make me feel stupid. It's all of those like
Mhm.
layers. So trying to
Yeah.
be that multiplier leader. But once I established that trust with people, I was able to then leverage those relationships and get to the bottom of a situation very quickly so that we could resolve it. And
Mhm.
they would share things with me that I needed to know. They trusted me not to use it in an inappropriate way. But then I could go and I had to behave properly too. Right?
Yeah.
If I had kind of some confidential information, how did I take that and use it in a way that was constructive, that got to the bottom of whatever the situation was, and we could all move forward then. But again, if I didn't have that trust, they wouldn't have told me things that they were willing to share with me that I needed to know.
Well, and I mean, there's trust for them within you as a leader, but there's also trust for you as a leader in your team of that they are going to be accountable for their commitments and delivering on their number and what they've said that they've done. So I found, it's that building trust isn't just you as a leader for them to trust you, but equally for you to trust them and to really build that environment that then accelerates how you can work.
Yes. And Katie, I think what I saw with you and I being there, we behaved that way. We had a very open door policy.
Hmm.
It wasn't an issue if somebody that didn't report to me came and talked to me, and then I spoke to their leader and said I was speaking with so and so. Nobody was mad or upset or felt threatened by it, because we
Right.
established that as, this is our leadership style. We want everybody on the team working as almost like a family.
Hmm.
And so once we all started doing that, people weren't afraid to
Yes.
reach out and never feel like, this is the wrong thing to do. There wasn't that authoritarian leadership style. That was very important.
And I saw that trust also play out in how you communicated and especially how you thought about structuring all hands calls. Being respectful of there's going to be one from global, one from the whole region, one from your country. There's going to be a lot of compounding calls. How can we make sure that as we're coming together, we're adding value, we're celebrating where we need to, we're having honest conversations where we need to, and that when we are communicating, it's intentional and with value and direct.
And we evolved those, right? We always evolved those. And I think it's very important to let the teams speak to each other as much as they hear from you, if not
Hmm.
more. So I, again, I don't have all the answers. And there's so many smart people out there that, why not elevate them and have them
Yep.
share their experiences with each other, because then they see that, wow, there are some really smart people on our team here. And then we also did celebrate a lot of successes, but celebrated people's promotions. People's,
Mhm.
they just got married, they had a baby. It's like we celebrated life, right?
Yeah.
This work thing is a big part of everybody's day. And so,
Mhm.
think of it a little bit more than what are your results. It can't
Yeah.
just be about the what, it has to be about the how and the whole, life thing that's going on.
Part of being an authentic leader and an effective leader is having to have difficult decisions, have hard conversations. Can you talk about how you brought your leadership principles into some of the change that had to happen in the region?
I came in there and I knew there were some challenges with certain potentially leaders or certain individual contributors that needed to be addressed. So, and I
Mhm.
I knew that. I've never walked onto a team where it's perfect, and I never left a team that's perfect. Right? That's just kind of the. And
It's
I've
real.
always said you've got the 20% of the top performers, generally 60 to 70% are right in the middle. And they're pretty good, and they kind of ebb and flow. And then you might
Mhm.
have 10 to 20% depending or more on a micro team where really there's got to be a lot of change that happens. Um, for me and what I've learned to do is you have to listen to everybody fairly. You will have input from people that may give you a, "Hey, watch out for this with this person," but let's give everybody the benefit of the doubt to, and give everybody the, same opportunity to have that conversation with you, and then so I built the trust, even
Yeah.
though I knew the individuals that may not make the turn. They may not just make the turn, I guess, is the way I'd describe it. But even then, when we started to have difficult conversations, and again, I approach it with, let's talk about you. How are you doing? Situational leadership. How do you feel about how things are going? There is numbers. So sometimes it's easier in sales because, like, you're at 50% and you have been for 3 years in a row. Or, you're in pre-sales, your demos or whatever, right? The feedback that
Yeah.
we're getting about you. So there's lots of, but if you approach it with how are you feeling about how things are going at work with you personally? Now we've already built trust, right? We've had multiple conversations maybe.
Mhm.
And so having a difficult one that is much harder to do if it's a first or second conversation you're ever having with that person. It's
Yeah.
really hard. And so it is sort of like that sandwich thing, but you don't have to do the sandwich thing necessarily in the conversation, right?
Mhm.
So it's like a catch up. Hi, Katie, how are you? Oh, Katie, trust me. Hi, she's smiling. We talk a little bit. The open ended question, how are you feeling about things or how they're going at work for you, right?
Yeah.
And then and they generally know. So they will generally say, well, this or this or this. So maybe my leadership trust score wasn't very good if I'm a leader, or my results haven't been very good. Let's
Mhm.
talk about it.
Yeah.
What's going on there? What do you think maybe we need to work on to do differently? You're either going to get people that are going to be in denial
Mhm.
and defend, 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 or they're going to come clean and say, yeah, I'm really struggling here and I need help. And then that the path is, okay, let's get the help that you need and let's hope for change, right? And you end
Yeah.
the conversation, great, we've got a game plan. I'm going to take this action, you're going to take this action. If they're
Mhm.
in denial and the blame, then that becomes just a different ending conversation. Like, okay, we
Yeah.
need to do some follow up because I don't feel like, but you can have that conversation because there's already been multiple conversations. It's much like with your children, right? It's not hard to sit down with your kid because they know you love them at the end of the day. They wake up,
Right.
90% of the conversations are good. So if you have 10 to 20% that are tough, you want them to still feel like you care about them. It's not
Mhm.
you as an individual, it's your performance right now, which might need just a misalignment in the role.
Well, I love that your approach is simply to ask questions and make that human connection. I've always said people can't argue with their own conclusions. So I could tell you we've only made our number 50% of the time for the last 3 years. But if I asked you questions and you can articulate some of the hurdles and the challenges that you're seeing or where you feel like it's not
Yeah.
successful, then it's on the table for us to talk about in a different way. And it's what I observed is traditionally in sales, you're used to the authoritarian leader who comes in yelling and you're scared of them. And you came in with a much more gentle approach, bringing that authenticity and a lot of grace. And I think that that grace was really an attractor, for our teams, but also for talent to want to join. And I think that was something special that happened is we really became a magnet for talent and like a incubator for growth.
We did. And, we had leadership changes. You were a leader that came in
Mhm.
and it was a good thing. The leader that you replaced ended up moving on to doing something different, but you were able to help raise the level of the leaders that reported to you. I had an opportunity to change out a couple of leaders and we brought in some, you know, outside talent.
Yeah.
And then, but I had to then empower them and give them the time to do what I was doing, right? I couldn't just say, where's the change? Where's the change? Where's the
Yeah.
results? And listen to you and listen to them that here's what I've learned, here's what I'm uncovering, here's what we had lots of conversations about, okay, where are you at with this? And at the end of the day, I also believe that people need to own their decisions. So if you are adamant about something,
Mhm.
I had to say, okay, Katie's closer to this than me. Maybe I don't disagree based on what I'm seeing or hearing,
Yeah.
but do you trust her? Yes. So I have to empower her and I have to let this thing play out and see if she's wrong or if it doesn't really matter
Mhm.
because I'm going to support her at the end either way.
Well, and I think that's one of the great parts about structuring the conversations with questions is you're giving them a chance to share things that you need to learn that might change your perspective and might open up a different avenue than you initially came in thinking of how we were going to solve for this. So that's, I think a great way to think about how that trust building and accountability can continue to unfold through the questions that you're asking, the
Yeah.
space and time that you're giving as well. I definitely saw that time be a very powerful thing where, yeah, we both know we had a region that was struggling for a long time. And, you brought in a new leader and it didn't turn around immediately. It wasn't the next month, the next quarter, but because you gave the time and you had the trust that what was happening, I saw that region completely turn around and becoming one of the strongest performing regions for us. And I think that's
Yes.
because of the intentionality.
When we hear people say things about that they're struggling with,
Mhm.
you ask them, well, what would you do differently? Could you come up with a proposal to me as to what should change here?
Yeah.
Like, was it our AEs that need to help? Like, they're doing things that are not helping you do your job. And you and I spent a lot of time because oftentimes pre-sales and sales don't always play well in the sandbox together,
Yeah.
right? They get very frustrated. There's a lot of last minute things that happen. But if you listen to both sides of the story, the truth always lies in the middle somewhere, and generally you can figure out what um, what needs to change. Yes, AEs need to change. Probably some pre-sales things need to change. Can we
Yeah.
put some process in there maybe that gives more visibility to things? Ask better questions. So I think challenging people that way in a good way, right?
Oh,
Come
yeah.
back with a proposal. Don't just complain.
Mhm.
Come back with something and so we can work on it together. And generally, when you put it back in their laps, if they're really serious about it, it's really bothering them
Mhm.
versus I'm just venting. They will put their thought into it and come back with something, and maybe you don't aren't able to exactly do that, but generally, good stuff comes out of
Yeah.
that.
Well, and I find that oftentimes when we hear a problem or a challenge, we jump on that right away of, okay, we got to solve for this. Let's off to the races. And the first things that shared isn't necessarily the right thing that we need to be solving for. So one of the training classes that I took was about fostering innovation. And I always took away, and I write things on Post-it notes that I keep on my monitor to remember, but it was asking the question, and what else? And what else to getting to that right thing that we need to be solving for.
Yes, it's very easy to try to fix things,
Hmm.
and that's one of those. You're very familiar with the multiplier and diminisher concept,
Yep.
right? Um, and I was guilty of that as an accidental diminisher in my leadership style. And if you're ever really brave, go ask your team, tell me what of these, and you can go Google multiplier and diminisher for those of you that haven't read the book, but there's, I think, five or six, right? that are on
Mhm.
either side. You're an accidental diminisher for these things and a multiplier. I would ask them, tell me what one or two things I'm doing subconsciously to diminish, be a diminisher
Yeah.
in my leadership style. We all are guilty of them.
Mhm.
And then what multiplier things am I doing well that I really should continue to do well?
Yep.
So, they told me honestly, sometimes I jumped to solve the problem too quickly. And, I was guilty of that because I just wanted to get it done. And I felt like
Mhm.
I've got the answer. I don't have time to maybe work through it with them. But that was something that I had to slow down. I had to force myself to listen more
Mhm.
and not just jump to like solving the problem.
Another great thing that I saw when you talk about how you were developing people was you being really a connector of people. And that's part of the reason why we joined Latin America is our network and our
Mhm.
exposure to the depth of resources that you don't always know when you're
Right.
just in Peru or Argentina. And that's kind of the balance of the world that of resources. Can you talk about how you kind of navigated that balance of just not only your direct reports, but thinking about the bigger business goals?
Yeah. So, um, networking is so important and just genuine relationships. I want to say more than, oh, I know this person.
Yeah.
But when I started out at SAP, I remember asking people, and I think this is a very good thing to do when you're joining an organization. Tell me somebody that I should talk to.
Yeah.
Like, and I met because at the time I was more in an operational role, and they were saying this person in finance, this person in legal, and, they were like, "Wow, nobody's ever reached out and said, 'Oh, my team interacts with your team,' and somebody said I should get to know you and that we'll probably be working together," and usually under crisis, right? So, but in building that network, right, and that's one of the things that I really like to do is get to know as many people as I can in I'm not asking you for a favor way,
Right.
but you can always come to me. When I needed those relationships later on
Mhm.
because I saw the need
Yeah.
and I was like, "Oh, I could connect this person with this person. I think they could help each other."
Mhm.
Mostly, maybe it was more one way, but I didn't feel like embarrassed to ask because I would reciprocate in any way I could.
Mhm.
And if I didn't even know that person, but I knew of somebody else, I would just say, "This is the situation. Do you know of anybody that might have the answers or can provide some help?"
Yeah.
And, Katie, you do that all the time as well, but boy, it pays dividends when you start to do that. I think people are surprised at how, rewarding it is for people to help others, and so maybe in their current role, they're not able to help as many people, but you tap them on the shoulder and say, "This is what's going on in Latin America, and we
Yeah.
could use a little bit of help. Not a lot of your time, a little bit of your knowledge. Can you jump on a call? Can you listen to the team's
Yeah.
situation with the customer?" Whatever it is, and help us do some brainstorming of ideas. They're so honored and flattered to be thought of
Mhm.
as a kind of that expert and to be brought into a region
Yeah.
and to help. It was incredible. And the people in Latin America, they loved it. They didn't even know that they could ask. It was just a wonderful thing to get out of the way too, right? I didn't need they were like, "Oh, should we have you on every call?" No, heavens no. You guys should just go.
Yeah.
I've introduced you. You guys take it from me here. I'll keep in touch. Let me know how things are going so that I can do the huge thank you. I can make sure that person, and I'm thinking of the storytelling,
Yeah.
that their leadership is aware of the contributions and the impact to the rest of the organization this
Mhm.
individual is, having with us.
Yep.
So I'm sure you have things to add to that, but boy, it does pay dividends and it really does help to accelerate success.
It's such a simple principle of just asking, "Can I take 30 minutes to pick your brain?" I remember when I first heard about that, I thought, "Really? That person, they're not gonna wanna talk to me." And then I found I was never turned down for that call. Because people would love to spend 30 minutes telling you about themselves, telling you about their career, their success, what they love to do. And it's a great way to start to build that relationship, so when you need to call in that favor and ask for something, you're not a stranger or an unknown.
Yeah.
They know that you are a genuine, curious person, and you've been helpful and want to be helpful in the future. So I think that that's such a great simple practice to take away with. If you are curious about, I want to learn more about marketing, or I've admired this person, the things they share on a call, reach out and ask. I mean, I've joined virtual networking events with my industry, and someone shared something in the chat that I thought was interesting. I found them at LinkedIn and sent a message. Hey, I know I'm a stranger. We were both on this webinar. I'd love to hear more about how the KPIs that you mentioned that you're measuring with your team. Most of the time, we end up having a great call and building a new connection, and those new ideas infuse an acceleration of innovation and problem solving, which has been such a great
Yes.
thing for us.
The third pillar of that, Katie, is when you do that for your team that reports to you. And, again, let's say out of all of your one on ones you've had with people, you might have 10% that have really strong career aspirations. They're at that turning point in their career where they've been wanting to do something
Hmm.
different and they have ideas of what that might be, but they don't even know kind of how to get started. Well, one of the things that I like to do is say, well, would you like to do an informational interview with somebody that's in that role today to
Yeah.
pick, just to your point, pick their brain? How did you get here? What does that look like?
Hmm.
And if I felt that that individual was really going to take advantage of that conversation, I would broker that request. I would
Same.
say, "Hey, I've got a favor, and you can ask me to do the same thing for you someday." I rarely got a no. It wasn't usually a no. It was, can I have them talk to somebody on my team that's like me because I just run swamped or
Yeah.
whatever? No problem. And that helped individuals on our team get new doors open. They got roles they said, I would have never gotten this. You opened this door and this door. They opened that next door and that next door.
Hmm.
And here I am now, you know,
Yeah.
2 years later, chief of staff of something. I'm thinking of one
Hmm.
individual. And it was just such an awesome feeling as a leader to say, good. I'm glad I opened that door for you. You had to get through the door,
Right.
but I can help open doors.
Well, and I think that's a hard thing sometimes as a leader is when you have great talent, you've got that foundation of trust, they're delivering results. You recognize the opportunity though of this is great for my team, but there's also something bigger for our company in supporting their growth. And that's not always a thing that is easy for a leader to see and recognize that bigger picture. But I think that made your team a magnet for talent because they knew it was a space that they were going to grow and they were going to grow into the next right thing through their experience working with you and the team.
Yes. And as we got good leaders, they also wanted to work for those individuals.
Yeah,
They were
absolutely.
like, there was a strong followership kind of across the board
Hmm.
because they knew they were going to get experiences, exposure, kindness. They knew that the team, everybody was like, oh, I love working on this team.
Yeah.
We remember all of the emojis that we would have on our team calls. So we,
So on that, albeit there was a lot of win announcements because we were a team that there was a lot of turnaround that had to happen, a lot of foundational work, and then some elevating of how we were working. But Latin America was very different than our big enterprise, North America, where it was a lot of net new volume business. Can you talk about leadership through that and how you kind of managed all of the flurry of activity?
yeah, it was very different, wasn't it? It wasn't like we were big hunting, whatever they call it, like we were not, we celebrated the smallest little deals.
Yeah.
And so we had to adopt a different mindset and approach the business as this is much more of a volume business. So we cannot operate like we're going to win 50% of these big deals. We need to operate like we're going to win 25% of the volume deals to get to our number.
Yeah.
And what do we do to get really good at that so we can be more efficient?
Hmm.
So I think understanding what that success looks like, what's the profile of it is
Hmm.
very important because then everything from the beginning to, going through pre-sales to how do we close the books really changes. From forecast calls, like your whole process has to be adjusted. The way you're talking to people, like you and I brainstorming about how do we get more efficient with the pre-sales approach,
Yeah.
because we cannot come to all of the volume with this mindset of everything has to be like a big demo because it's the biggest win ever. We had very like I think average deal size was something like $30,000.
Yeah.
So we had to approach it that way, but we actually had more volume than some of the equivalent team sizes in North America because they would win, $1 million deal, $2 million deal. So yeah, it did. I had to because I came from North America and I was a COO,
Yeah.
so I knew for the 3 years that I did that role what that business looked like, and to come into Latin America, it was like we are a rounding error. We are so small, and I remember the COO that I had. He said, "Boy, it's sort of embarrassing sometimes being on the call and the global call where
Mhm.
North America's got their big number and parts of Europe have their big number, and then we're little. APJ is little." Greater China's little, and I said, "Oh, you know what? Sometimes it's nice to fly under the radar because when
You
we were in
got to
North
get some stuff
America,
done without all the big eyes on you.
we did." I said, "Be appreciative
Yeah.
that they're not, like, calling us all the time." So,
Mhm.
yeah, I was a little grateful for that because, when I was a COO, my phone, the ding, 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 ding at quarter end,
Mhm.
the messages of, "Where is this? Where is this?" We didn't really get that. It was, "Hey, what's your final number looking like? I don't want details."
Well, we got to a
So
lot more predictability too. Because of the volume, we had to start the quarter with most of what was in our pipeline ready and mature to close in that quarter. And that was the big change that I saw. But how did you balance that? We need to focus hard on getting everything closed here in this quarter against that long range view that you need to have as that sales leader of the Q+2 also, because we can't just only focus on this quarter and miss coming in the next without what we need.
what I found to be probably the most successful in that, Katie, is having the cadence and the calendar. So you're not reacting at the last minute, but and it gets kind of boring after a while, but it's like, okay, we got this week, we have these things that we need to do. So we're looking at Q+1, Q+2, Q+3, and who is wearing, if you think of the RACI model,
Yeah.
whose responsibility is it? And then are we as leaders taking the necessary action with
Mhm.
the, the individual people that own it
Yeah.
to make sure they're following through? And you have to inspect and then say, hey, this looks like it's going a little yellow. Maybe it's going to be red here. That we just all had to get that machine going. And that was part of the behavioral changes. If the people didn't want to turn the corner and say, okay, I'll adopt this kind of maybe more process oriented sales approach and selling approach, not just
Yes.
sales, right? But selling approach. Um, they couldn't be on the team because we knew that what the outcome was going to be.
Mhm.
And I think that just took time to get that kind of rhythm going and the heartbeat, just it beats and beats and beats, but we needed it to beat a little differently and have everybody participating differently. But that definitely took some time across all of the roles in the sales organization.
One of the other
Mm.
changes that I saw for us is, we're a cloud business, so obviously you care about renewals, but especially over the last couple of years, we cared about renewals in a different way, where I saw it starting to be a part of our forecast call and dedicating a forecast call, talking about the upcoming renewals. Can you maybe talk a little bit about how, balancing in that renewal side where that's not directly your accountability in the same way as it was someone else's, but that business affecting your business and how you navigated that increased attention?
Look, I don't know if it was sort of accidental fortune for me, but when I joined and I got to know everybody, part of the external, like I would say peripheral team was the renewals team. And I learned that there was some challenges with, like, behavior, right? The team that was, I don't remember what their last title was, but the team that was managing the customers and the,
Yeah.
post-sales implementation didn't always get and these are the same customers we're still selling to because they oftentimes start with a module and then go to the next and the next and the next. We had pockets of those teams that were working really well, but we had a lot that were just like this. They didn't trust each other. There was finger pointing. I couldn't believe how much complaining I was hearing between these teams. And again, want to hear both sides. Don't want to jump to oh, because they don't report to me, I'm going to go beat them up. I wanted to listen and understand.
Yeah.
Then I wanted to hear the other side. And then what I realized is that part of the problem is they're just not talking. The leaders aren't talking.
Mhm.
The leaders are listening to people vent and then just assuming. So I stopped all of that and I told my leaders, you need to stop that. and you guys have to work together. So brought them into all of the meetings. It wasn't like occasionally we get together. And where we had bad blood that was really bad, we had to go fix it.
Yeah.
It just wasn't an option not to work with the teams that even if their job was renewal and our job was selling net new, that, as you said, over the 3 years, that evolved to the point where I started getting paid on a renewal number,
Mhm.
and my leaders did too, and it's like we didn't have catch up. We had already kind of addressed some of those problems in the first year, and so the teams were working really, really well together, and we had some of the highest renewal
We
rates,
did.
collaboration.
Well, and I saw that collaboration happening with helping us build a better strategy when we were trying to sell something new into those customers or a similar type of customer, because we would hear directly from them what that customer is doing, what was successful. And being able to, because of the trust that had been built, the authenticity in the relationships, being able to be a challenger and say, yes, we can still do that, but what if we did this? Or we found it was really helpful to do this. And you feel like you had that safety to have a voice and share a perspective that could bring about better for us on both sides of the business.
Yes. Yeah, I think we got to the point where everybody did want to work together
Mhm,
and understand you have value here. Why am I not bringing you in?
mhm.
Whereas before it was like your job is post sales implementation. Make sure they're adopting and using. But
Yeah.
I'm not going to bring you into my net new sale because you might disrupt it. We got past all of that kind of stay in your swim lane mindset.
You get to be a little bit scrappier when you fly under the radar. Yes. So, as we wrap up here, Annie, any advice that you would share with other aspiring or current sales leaders just as we think towards their future?
Well, I would say go look in the mirror and say, what is really my job here? What is the role of a leader? And then it's hard to say, it's hard to like package it all up, but just remind yourself that you are just a person like the people on your team. Think about the past leaders that you've had, those that have made you feel great. What did they do, say, or not say? What about leaders that you didn't like? What did they do that you don't want to emulate?
Mhm.
And if you're not really a person that cares a lot about people, I would say don't be a leader because you have to genuinely care about individuals. You have to want to get to know them
Yep.
in order to be able to truly lead them to success. You might be able to be a leader and, to your point, be authoritarian and get some results very short term. But the wake of what you're leaving, the feeling those people are going to have, the um, dissatisfaction in their jobs,
Mhm.
and that carries into their home. None of that feels good to be that kind of a leader. So, I think you have to just first pause and say, what kind of a leader am I truly? What kind of a person am I truly? And decide if that's really right for me.
Yeah. Well, I know I always would ask people if they were thinking about leadership to write out, 3 to 5 sentences. How would you describe yourself as a leader? Get feedback on that and think of it like your elevator pitch. If someone met me in an elevator and like, hey, have you met Annie? What would they say about you? And is that the type of leader that you feel like you're being?
Yes. And I remember in my 20s, I think I first became a manager. I was maybe late 20s, and it was a very, very small team. Um, but I had people tell me, oh, you're going to be in leadership someday, Annie. And I didn't know why they said that, but I think it was because they saw that I genuinely cared about people.
Mhm.
And I've always built the team and the networking and the collaboration and was confident if people needed to talk about things, but also wanted to help, like, go fix it. Like, let's go build a team maybe within the company to go address this problem and see if we can come back with a proposal as to how to address that. So, it was just I think I was just sort of born with some of those skills
Yeah.
like you, not everybody is. And a perfect person to give an example to is my husband. He's an engineer. He got promoted into leadership and he absolutely hated it. And, it was because he didn't want to listen to people and spend all that time. He loves being an engineer
Yeah.
and solving those types of problems. Good that he knows that because he's a great engineer, a much better engineer than he probably would have been as a people leader, wouldn't have had that impact on them.
Mhm.
So I think you got to be authentic about am I really a leader?
I love that. I
And
love
it's not a bad thing if you're not, right? We need individual contributors just as much. We
Mhm.
need the brilliance and that expertise. That's what I always tell people too. It's like, don't be apologetic if you don't want to be in leadership. You don't think you're the right fit for it.
Well, and leadership is also, there's the direct people leader that we always think about, but there's process leaders and project leaders, and there's so many different ways that you can bring those skills before you are in an official capacity that are still going to be adding tremendous value to your company.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. Well,
Wonderful.
this has been a lot of fun, Katie. So thank you for
Yes.
inviting me and for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for joining, Annie.
Okay. Bye.
Yeah.